Well, today on the Aspire podcast, we have Jake Madder. Welcome, Jake, to the Aspire podcast.
Thank you, Aaron. It's good to be here.
Jake is one of my good mates here in the northern beaches of Sydney.
God's country.
We are recording from such place right now. It's a beautiful, beautiful day today, Jake, is it not?
If only everyone could see it, Aaron.
It is. We were looking across the horizon, seeing some
Whales.
whales. So grateful to God for that. Thank you very much for coming on the podcast, mate. You're a minister down the road at St. Faith's Narrabeen as an assistant pastor.
Yep.
You do youth, you do mag, and
Yep.
a whole lot of other things, I'm sure.
Not too many. Hopefully, not too many more than that. Yeah. Yep.
I want to hear a bit about your story and a bit about how you came to be where you are today. Take us to chapter 1 of that story. Give us a bit of a sketch for you grew up here in the beaches down at Collaroy. Give us a bit of an insight as to what that was like.
Yeah. I have to lay claim to my actual roots, Aaron, which is Surrey Hills. I grew up on
That's
Riley
okay.
Street in
Beautiful
Surrey
place.
Hills.
Shout out to those in Surrey Hills.
It wasn't beautiful back then, let me tell you. It's God's favour has shined on that suburb in the last 30 years. But I grew up in Surrey Hills on Riley Street and went to Crown Street Public School. And then we moved here when I was 4.5. And so my parents nabbed a place in Collaroy, and they're effectively moving back into the community that had kind of fostered faith in them and actually given their relationship had brought them together. And so that was really nice. Growing up with like a lot of history of community and stuff. Went to St. Faith's growing up for a long time. Went to a Christian school in the local area, and just was really, am still really thankful to have been surrounded by incredible godly people, raised in godly community, and with parents who love the Lord too and prioritize that. So yeah, grew up in Collaroy. Loved it. School was actually really tough for me in most of my primary years into like year 7 and 8. And at the end of year 8, I moved schools, and things improved vastly. But I think looking back, what that actually afforded me was the opportunity to, even as a young person, like in my mind, I was just saying this to you before, I remember as a 3-year-old praying that Jesus would come into my heart with my auntie, and like just throughout those young years, having a very real kind of tangible, special sense of God's presence with me, and confidence in his work in my life. And just, maybe that's childish naivety, but also I think it's just a product of what happens when you raise a kid in faith community. And I'm still so thankful for that. And I think that was kind of like that sense of my own relationship with Jesus was really amplified by a lot of difficulty in relationships with my peers. And so that was a really special time, and I think it's actually foundational for kind of everything that's come since then, which is generally the way it is for most people, I suppose. But moved schools in year 9, all of a sudden had friends, and I was like, this is amazing. And so I threw myself into that, and I think over the course of time, needed to rely a lot less on Jesus, or felt that. And so I was still that kid who was, really entrenched in church community and from a family that everybody was very familiar with, and maybe felt the presence of the expectations that might come with that from people who've known you your whole life and seen you be just this kind of person, this kind of kid. So,
What sort of career did you see yourself going on at that point in time?
Like in high school?
Yeah, high school or back end of high school, finishing high school?
I don't know. Yeah, I don't think I knew. I was so wrapped up in the fact that I actually had people around me who liked me and I was friends with that I hadn't really thought heaps about. I'd spent most of my life being told that I should go into ministry, just by
Really, even then?
Yeah, like at 7. I think my dad asked me what I wanted to be when I grow up, and I think I said married at 7, which is really either cute or problematic. I don't know. But yeah, there just seemed to be this kind of like narrative of expectation, at least in my mind, growing up, that I was suited for ministry, which is, yeah, I don't know, it's a bit weird. But I think that just came from an encouraging place in people. I don't know if I knew what to do with that as a young
Even as a
man.
7-year-old.
Even as a
Far out.
7-year-old. Yeah,
Signs early.
yeah. My dad was, but I think key in that. It's like, one day you'll make a great minister. And that's meant a lot coming from my dad as well, because he was a minister's son, but and this is a whole nother podcast story, but that actually was really hard for my dad. So for him to encourage me towards that was, I knew that was a big deal, because it's not something that he would have done lightly. So yeah, I think I finished school, and I didn't really know what to do. I loved music. I grew up in a musical family. Like the private music education sphere was the whole context of my musical world, and of my family world, as well as church. And so we're constantly, our family's playing music in church all the time together, and I got in. My dad's a builder. Mum's a music teacher. Gotten into architecture at the end of year 12 because I was creative, enjoyed art and things like that, and I thought that might be fun. Got into architecture, but then was encouraged by my parents and other people in my life, namely my music teachers, to go and do music at uni, and so I did that instead. And I really, at this point, had just completely, I think, given myself over to the feeling of like validation and affirmation that came from the people around me. I didn't really have a lot of thought for who I was becoming or what I wanted to do or be. And so I went to uni, and it wasn't a bad idea on my parents' behalf. It was just, I don't think I was ready. So I dropped out of a Bachelor of Arts and a Bachelor of Music. And then I tried again next year at a different university. I dropped out of a Bachelor of Arts with a Diploma of Education. And at that point, I think from that point on, like I just became more and more estranged from that community of faith, and probably my family too. And I was just kind of stuck following a cycle of, I think, probably trying to deal with a bunch of my insecurities by pandering to people and myself. That kind of landed me in by the age of 24, landed me in a pretty broken situation. And God reached out in that brokenness and reminded me he'd never really gone anywhere. And also gently reminded me that he's given us instruction on what's good for life for a reason, because it's actually good for life. And so I in his kindness, he humbled me to see that that's the truth, and very graciously led me through some big decisions and changes in my life to try and submit myself to his will and his instruction, respond to his grace. And yeah, that involved me. I'd left church at that point. And that I'd actually gone from being in a very Anglican kind of, not a very Anglican church, but like a conservative Anglican church. I'd swung the opposite way in year 11, gotten out of there and went to the Pentecostal church up the road, much to the chagrin of a lot of my community, my parents. And when I say my community, I mean my church community there. But those years were actually just really helpful in the scheme of things. And eventually, though, it was pretty clear to me. I was like, I'm not actually living a Christian life here. I'm just showing up. It's the equivalent of showing up at McDonald's and hoping it makes you a cheeseburger. So I think
you must be a youth minister.
At some point, I worked at McDonald's. So I can say that.
Nice.
Yeah. Shout out Warriewood McDonald's. I think I dropped the act at some point and just had left church, and realized at this turning point at roughly 24, so I just need to go and do what I know is God said is best, which is submit to Him in my life and get back into the habit of gathering with His people, sitting under His word. And He was really kind in leading me through that.
And at that point, were you then starting to shift towards that ministry route, or were you still
not at all. I was still avoiding ministry hardcore. Yeah, I think
you did have a sense that maybe you would do it, but you but you're avoiding it.
Yeah, maybe. I think like my whole life I'd looked at ministry and I've gone, well, wouldn't you do it if you could? Like, and these are my convictions, like that I never lost, just tried to ignore for a long time. But like I'd looked at ministry and I'd thought, what's more important than the gospel? And say like, and sharing salvation with people for eternity. It doesn't. There's there's nothing to compare to that. It's a dumb question. The answer is nothing. Um, and so I'd always thought, I think just subconsciously, I hadn't worked through my thinking at all, but wouldn't you do it if you could? Imagine if you could. And I think I just knew my whole life, I'm not the kind of person. My life, people around me might not know this. They probably knew more than I thought they did, but my life does not look like the life of somebody that is ready or equipped or suited to go into gospel ministry. But there was still this thing in the back of my head. I was like, well, but if you could, wouldn't you? And it wasn't particularly prevalent. I actually, I moved out of the place I was living in to get out of unhealthy living habits. I moved back to my parents, which was that was a big move. But it was really good. They were very kind. I moved back to some faiths. God reminded me that, like, his people were a huge part of the way that he works in our lives. And that was just an incredible time. But I also started a carpentry apprenticeship. So I quit teaching music. I've been doing that for 8 years. And went from being somebody in a classroom who knows stuff to being an apprentice who just has no clue at all. And God just even worked through that to humble me and help me realize that I needed teaching. And so over the years, like that grew, and my faith grew, and my passion for understanding it and the need to understand my faith, like to figure out my salvation with fear and trembling. It just became so real in that context, because I'm running into, as a chippy, I'm running into people every day who are just so far from sanctified or saved and in desperate need of Jesus. And it opened my eyes big time, I think. And I also just had these amazing opportunities with the people I was working with to have an influence in their lives, and not just teach them how to swing a hammer, but also share Jesus with them. And so that work context was really special. And people would always just be like, "Yeah, you're such a youth minister." Like kids from a church context would come and do apprenticeships, and they'd be like, "Bro, such a youth minister." And I would always react pretty sharply, like, "Shut up, it's not happening." And clearly, I was wrong.
Yeah, so what's changed? What happened to suddenly become that youth minister that you thought you weren't going to be?
Yeah. I think I was avoiding it. Not that I thought I wouldn't, but I think over the years of my, let's call it, I just call it what it is, disobedience. People from like godly people in my life had not given up on me and pursued me, and still encouraged me to not just listen to Jesus to follow him, but just along the way always been like, and even in the early days of me kind of coming back to submitting to Christ, like encouraged me to think about, okay, so when are you going to come into ministry? And I just always ignored them because they've known me my whole life, and this is just part of the expectation of who I was as a kid. And I think that just came from a real deep place of insecurity, of feeling like the wrong person, or like I wasn't there yet. And some of that was probably really right and healthy. I think eventually, though, it became like just a fear thing. And at some point, just after COVID, somebody came onto the staff team at our church where I was serving in music and just doing a few things around the place. And after a year of being there, this man who I didn't know prior to this at all, who had no idea of who I was growing up, said to me, "I think I've known you for a year. I think you need to consider going into ministry." And for me, that was that hit hard and fast. It was almost like I didn't realize it. It's probably what I'd been waiting for, is for somebody to objectively come to me and make a suggestion that I'd been suspicious of, like that was coming for a long time. And really it was God just condescending to my level of fear and insecurity and being really gracious with me in, I think, just pushing me towards what, or enabling me to take some steps towards what I probably more and more had the sense that I should have been doing.
What were you doubting at the time?
I think my journey back to being able to wholeheartedly claim that I was a Christian was really painful. Like I'd really messed up my life, and I'd hurt me and I'd hurt other people. I think I carried that with me pretty heavily for a while. And so I was probably, I don't know, I was probably doubting that. I guess I was probably just doubting that I was forgiven enough to go into calling other people to follow Jesus. Yeah, I think some of the insecurity that had been generated from stuff in school probably was still just following me around. But maybe some of those feelings about how I related to people had transferred to not being good enough. Probably also in God's eyes to go into ministry. So I had to ask some big questions at that point. Spoke a lot with people I trusted. Also, at the same time that it was suggested to go into taking on an apprenticeship at church. At the same time that happened, my boss said, "Hey, I just want you to put down the belt, stay in the company. I'll pay you twice as much, and be really good." And I said no, and I didn't tell him I was because I was thinking about this. And then 2 months later, he came back and he said, "Okay, look, I know you said no last time, but we've got this other job coming up. So I just, again, I think this is the one. This would be really great for you. You should think about it. I'd love you to do this." And I was like, "Oh, okay, the heat's turning up." And so I was married to Kelly at that point.
This is around COVID?
This is 2020, end of 2020. Yeah, and the thing about the building industry is it didn't stop during COVID. We just kept going. So, yeah, it's hard for me to pinpoint exactly when it was.
So why didn't you take it? Why didn't you take this promotion?
I didn't take it because I knew I was considering ministry at the same time. And so it was really awkward just stalling with my boss. But eventually I was chatting with Kelly, and it was a big difference for our family. The impact financially it was going to have was huge. It was either, go back to being an apprentice again, which is, actually very generously minimum wage, or keep doing what I'm doing, double what I'm earning at the moment, and our family's on the way to the Northern Beaches dream. I say that in inverted commas. So it was a big call to make. We made a big decision. I said, "Look, Dylan, I'm really sorry. I know this. It's not a total surprise, but you probably weren't signing up to marry somebody who was going into ministry. You were marrying a builder." And she's like, "Yeah, but I always kind of expected that this is probably going to probably could pop up at some point." And I was like, "Oh, okay. Well, I think this is probably what God's calling us to do." And yeah, we chatted with people we trusted. We prayed about it. We took the plunge. And I told my boss, and he was, no, I was bummed. I loved my job, but he was bummed too. He's like, "What about all the ministry here?" I was like, "Yeah, but what about all the ministry, that's happening elsewhere? What about all the people in churches who also work in building industry who need to be encouraged to share their faith and live it out?" I just had to weigh up where I thought I was going to make a bigger impact for the gospel. The other thing is I'd started studying in 2019, just part-time, when SMBC was running the Narrabeen campus. Shout out to Narrabeen Baps for hosting that.
So it had some fruit there.
Yeah, man. I just lived up the road, and I was like, this is great. I need to wrestle with understanding my faith if I'm gonna really take being a Christian and living as a Christian seriously. And so I just jumped in because I wanted to ask big questions and get my head around things. And God in His kindness used that to prepare me for ministry as well, I think. And yeah, so thanks for running the Northern Beaches campus, SMBC. It was not a lost venture. Yeah.
How was that apprenticeship year or two? What were those times like? How did God grow you in that season and prepare you for what was after that?
Yeah. I signed on for 2 years. the guy that made the suggestion was my trainer, more or less. And it was great. He protected me really well from just being like the gap filler, and I was given really intentional time to think through. I also got to pick up a bit more study in that time, which was really helpful. But just think through what ministry was about, see how it played out in different ways. I had a great time. It was.
What did your week look like in terms of a rough structure?
I'd just show up, and I was already running like music and things like that, doing some mag stuff in church, and so that stayed. I actually was so determined not to end up being a youth minister that I made my day off Friday, but I was apprenticing underneath the youth minister, so they were really gracious in allowing me to do that. But my week looked like showing up Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, working in the office, helping particularly our youth minister at the time, just with even administrative stuff. But he'd throw me, some talks every now and then, and gave me the opportunity to speak on our summer camp. I got to speak on Romans 8 across 3 sermons, and I just loved it. I was like, oh my goodness, I enjoy this. That's crazy. And the rhythm of like life in church, Sundays gets pretty heavy. We're a church with 4 services on a Sunday, and so there was a bit of a shift, a bit of an adjustment to be made for that, for Kel and I. But that first year and a half was really just getting to sit behind the curtain and be a part of some of the conversations that take place, and that was really valuable. Keep doing the ministries that I've been involved in, but probably from a more informed perspective and a more intentional perspective. And then after a year and a half, he took a job elsewhere, and I just ended up getting, I guess that's promoted. I don't know.
Taking on his job.
Yeah.
Did you anticipate that happening?
No,
Taking over?
That was a shock. Yeah, the conversation had been started because they were keen to help me find a way to go into full-time paid ministry, and didn't want to waste the opportunity. And I think things just lined up, and it was like that was always the plan, but it was not the time frame that we'd discussed. And so, yeah, I felt like I was in over my head straight away. Like I remember I had to run a camp 8 weeks after I started, across the weekend for our youth group and all our leaders, and I was just like, what the heck am I doing? And sometimes it still feels exactly the same, but it's been a really really fruitful time, just for me even, like, learning to trust that God's at work in my weakness, which He promises to be, and certainly has been. So, yeah.
Were there any other obstacles that were holding you back from going on this trajectory, even at this point in time when you're doing your apprenticeship? Things were making you think, I should do something else, or was it pretty smooth sailing once you'd begun your apprenticeship?
I think I'd gone into the apprenticeship expecting that this was just what stepping into full-time paid ministry looked like, because I think that was part of the pathway that the powers that be, had been working to open up for me. It was prior to that where I think I had to do a lot of work to push through some things that felt like they were in the way. The financials was a big one, but I think we've only got so long here, can't take any of it with us, and yeah, well, that's a whole nother thing, but God was kind him.
That's a very real and important part of the discussion for a lot of people, it sounds so.
Oh yeah, it's huge. I was teaching my scripture class this morning about the moment where Jesus is walking towards the disciple in the boat. Disciples in the boat, he's walking on the water, and I think I'd forgotten in the scope of that miracle that Jesus had invited Peter to step out with him. Like I don't know why. I just, as I was preparing this morning, I was like, what a crazy thing to do. And that's following Jesus. When he calls, there's going to be times where it feels like walking on water, and that doesn't happen. So I think financially it probably felt a bit like we're being asked to walk on water, and But one thing I knew I was confident of is that um, God wasn't just going to like drop me off the edge of a cliff. He's going to take care of us. So I just had to really, that got tested. I had to put that into practice. And he's been incredibly faithful to that. Who would have thought? It's incredible. Yeah. So financial provision was one obstacle. The biggest one out of everything was just me. Like, I was in the way of this for years, and I think any Christian would tell you that we are in the way of growing as disciples of Jesus. But anybody in ministry will tell you that it takes a lot of work. It's an ongoing process to deal with who you are as you lead people to Jesus. So I think just for such a long time, I wasn't ready to trust God with the mess that I had made of my life. And he's proven to me in the last 4 years, however long it's been, of ministry, that he does not waste a single thing, not even our dumb decisions, which will hurt us, have hurt me, but like have been so valuable in teaching me. Like I did so many weird like jobs and stuff. In between teaching, I was working at JB Hi-Fi. I was writing music for like ads and jingles at one point. Like what else? Labouring and baristaing and all kinds of stuff. And God's used all of it, even in ministry. But like outside of it too, it's all been something that He's used for His kingdom, and that just blows my mind because I made a mess of my life, but God wasn't fussed by that. So I think I was the biggest obstacle, and I'm still learning to get out of the way.
Tumbling. What was it like studying at SMBC part-time? Give us a bit of a snapshot for what that part-time experience is like through your apprenticeship and then through being youth minister at St. Faith's for the last, how many years you been there now?
I think it's 3.
3 years?
Yep.
Yeah. So, you want to speak to that?
I am so thankful. I don't know what, it was just because I'd got wind. I think my grandma told me because she goes to Narrabeen. She's like, oh, there's some college starting classes at Narrabeen. So I was like, oh, okay. But then I checked it out and I was like, oh no, yeah, it seems bizarre to me looking back that I would have been like, yeah, let's do that. Because I loved school. Like I found it was great. And I didn't do too badly. I didn't have to try massively.
You're studious. We've studied together a little bit at points. Very studious.
Part of who I am.
Good at his Hebrew language. There you go.
There's a strong perfectionistic bent in there that is it's just pride. So it's gracious to call me studious, but look, I wasn't shy of studying, and I love learning. So I just said yep, and it was amazing. In-person classes on a Monday night were like the highlight for me. I'd sit down with a bunch of randoms. I remember Alan Mudridge, Anthony Bramall. I think even Rob Smith maybe came out to teach a unit. Maybe I wasn't in it. I don't know, but I'm sure other people did too. But I just remember being in these classes. Matt Van Eyden, well, yeah, like being in these classes and just it was a world I'd never dived into before. And so thankful for the wisdom of the lecturers, their time and the generosity of themselves as well. And they drove a long way for those classes, man. Like I drove 5 minutes, and anyway. So I was really thankful for that. Moved to like a hybrid kind of online take when things got to the point where I had to do different classes to what was being offered at Narrabeen, and just over the years have done a mix of being in person. We did Hebrew on a Monday afternoon or Friday afternoon. It must have been a Monday.
I'm going to say it was a Friday. No.
Friday morning.
I'm not sure. Friday morning.
Friday morning?
Yeah.
Which is dicey because I'm running youth on a Friday night, and anyway, like I've loved it.
Good class, by the way.
Yeah, it was
good
great.
Class.
Yeah. I have
worked out
loved
for you, that.
part-time study. Yeah, it has been an enormous challenge though. Yeah, an enormous challenge. Um, Full-time work. I'm just looking forward to the day, not because I don't enjoy the study, looking forward to the day where my schedule's less crammed, or the demands on my time are a little less. They feel extreme at the moment, but again, even now from a distance, like zooming into a class, I'm doing Psalms with Kit right now, and it's actually been one of the hardest kind of seasons of my life for me to feel like I can really sink my teeth into what I'm studying. But even just being able to, log in, clock on, and engage for that kind of 3 hour window has just been really refreshing, actually, for me. So much of what we've been studying has been like just showing up in real time. Given it's the Psalms, that's probably not a huge surprise, but I'm just learning so much, and I'm immensely thankful that I've been able to just plot away at it. I'm just on one subject a semester at the moment. It feels like it's going to take an eternity to finish, but we'll get there. And I'm reminding myself it's not about getting it done. It's about just making the most of what I'm actually being presented with, the opportunity to engage with each time, in each lecture and in the assessments and things like that. So it's been so enriching for my faith, and it's given me a confidence in knowing that I've been forced to wrestle through some bigger questions, like some of the things that come up in our theology units and elsewhere. Just like I've looked at the essay sheet where it gives you the questions that like here's 4 questions, choose one and answer it. I don't know if you get that feeling where you look at them, well, you're done now, so you won't anymore. But you look at the sheet and you're like, oh, I don't want to do any of these. Like they're all just big and hard, and shivers. But like working through that has just been so rich and enriching for me. So I'm immensely thankful to have been able to study part-time, because I couldn't have done it full-time. It just, in the way that my life's kind of eventuated over the last few years, I wouldn't have been able to study otherwise. Yeah. So I'm very thankful.
That's cool. It's really cool.
Yeah.
And what have your first few years of ministry been like at St. Faith's as a youth minister and music minister, with all those different things I'm sure that it comes in addition to that, but any reflections on just the first chapter really of your ministry life? I guess you could count the apprenticeship as well as part of it, so that kind of brings up to what, 5 years?
Maybe. I probably should have thought about this before I came. I think if it was it's probably closer to 4. It's probably 4 including the apprenticeship, but okay, I remember. Yeah.
5 years to reflect upon.
Joys and challenges of the last 4 years. Sorry, did you want to scratch your eye?
No.
Oh. I interrupted you. No. Joys and challenges of the last 4 years. I think I was surprised to find that I wasn't surprised to find that I enjoyed preaching. I was probably hesitant to admit it because I've been told I talk too much my whole life. But it's just gotten harder as time's gone on, not easier. So it's been a joy and a challenge, and I love the challenge of it too. Just thinking, always thinking, how am I going to bring myself to this task of God's word coming to bear on His people in this moment. It's always a challenge. I think I read something that said the first 40 years of preaching are the hardest. So my expectations aren't
that sounds about right.
Yeah, that I'm gonna start hitting it out of the park anytime soon. But I think the same article said you got to be ready to preach like 200 just average sermons.
Wow.
And in God's kindness, they'll be effective because of the work of His Spirit. But at the same time, it's not something that's going to make you feel wonderful about what you're doing all the time. I think that's been my experience anyway. I walked away going, "Geez, like was that just me gas bagging for like 20 minutes? Or, so God's been really,
It's overcoming a bit of that internal insecurity to know that God is still working
yeah, it's still
through
there.
the loaves
Through
of
my
bread
mess.
that we have.
Yeah, absolutely. It doesn't, I don't think it's, from what I hear, it doesn't go away either for a lot of people. So, um, yeah, I'm just buckling up the seatbelt and getting ready for the ride, I think. The other thing that's been like a big learning kind of curve for me is that there's a difference between doing ministry and leading in ministry. And sometimes there's like good overlap in that. But for us, where we're at in the season of church that we're in, a lot of it looks like
Big church, right?
bigger.
Yep.
Yeah. A lot of it looks like thinking about leading leaders and raising leaders and training leaders and just the bigger picture. So that's been a great challenge. I love working with people. I love seeing people step up into things. I love watching people mature, supporting them in doing that. Like that's just that's the joy of the Christian life. You okay?
Went down the wrong. That's all right.
Go and give a big one. You all right?
Don't have too much, two people.
I'm
Eventually gets to you.
I'm here for you, Aaron. Yeah, watching people just mature and take on more of what God's inviting them to do with who He's made them to be, and living out their faith, sharing their faith. That's been a real joy, but it's a challenge to work through some of that bigger kind of strategic thinking, because there's just so much to do in ministry all the time. There's never really a dull moment, which makes it really exciting, really dynamic. But I'm learning that I need to, again, really kind of rein myself in and understand how the way I work and think is affecting my productivity for the sake of the gospel. So that's been good to think through. And I've got I work with a wonderful team of people at Some Faith too. So I'm very, very, very thankful. Very thankful for team, actually, as well. Yeah, that it's not just me or, yeah. I'd be terrified if it was just me. Yeah. Yeah, so it's been good.
That's cool. That's really cool. Without wanting to show your hand too much, because I know you've got a pact with Ben, your boss, to say you got to give him 10 years notice. What do you
He's got to give me 10
envision
years
your
notice
future? What do you envision your future path being, or are you just keeping an open hand at the moment, just faithfully serving at St. Faith's, and or do you have plans beyond that? And
what are my aspirations?
Yeah.
I think my whole life I've kind of responded to like, what do you want to do? Maybe not my whole life, but in recent times, I've used the idea of just being faithful a lot in response to that kind of a question. Because just like in year 12, when I was leaving school and had no kind of, huge desires, I was playing a lot of music at that time and really enjoyed it. And I was like, I'll just go and be a muso. That didn't happen. God had much better things in store. But I'm just confident that if I'm willing to be obedient to what God's put in front of me, that He'll lead me through that and into what's on the other side of it too. So right now, my aspirations for the next 5-10 years are pretty wrapped up in what it could look like to see a Northern Beaches that knows Jesus. I was just saying it before, that's the vision for our church, and it's something that I'm like kind of pretty captured by. And like, imagine if you went out to coffee this morning and more people than not at the cafe were Christians. People spending time with Jesus over coffee in the morning. Like, what would that do for the Northern Beaches? I think just the more you start to think about it beyond it just being like a cool, catchy catchphrase that maybe we stole from CMS missionaries, but the idea of it in reality is something that just really grabs my heart. And so what does that look like over the next 5-10 years is actually the question. And I feel less like I have a whole lot of ambition for myself and a lot more of a desire to do what I can to be faithful in this season where God's put me. Kel and I, it's interesting. Kel and I have had opportunities to think about going elsewhere, and we've tried to be really genuine in considering them, because I don't want to write off that God might call us to something else. I'm confident that eventually he probably will, even if that's just retirement. Do you know what I mean? But like, I want to keep my ear out for his leading, and so far we haven't felt called to move. So what we're doing might look different, but yeah, aspirations for the next 5-10 years. Grow on my ability to shepherd God's people and love them and point to Jesus, and also just hang on to my own faith with all the passion and joy that I can. Yeah.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Any advice that you give to someone thinking about going into gospel ministry of various forms, and maybe someone who was in a similar position to you where they had different options, or just any advice in general that you give to someone thinking about it, considering it, listening to this right now, in light of your own story, in light of your own experiences up to today?
I don't know if everybody will agree with this, but I kind of feel like if you're thinking about it, like if it's an option, you've got to have a pretty good reason to say no. Like if God's put you in a position where it is a consideration, even if it's just like a potential that maybe you might be interested. Find out. Like discern whether the people who are godly in your life and know you think you should, and be strong and courageous. Don't be afraid, because God's with you wherever you go. And so if you think you could, and if other people are going to encourage you towards that end, you've got to have a pretty good reason to not, because what else does the world need more? Like, we don't get this time back. So that would be my advice to somebody who's thinking about ministry. But if you're in a situation where you might have written yourself off from that inkling because maybe your godliness hasn't historically been 100% like everybody else's has.
Yeah, right.
maybe you're the only person out there who hasn't been completely faithful to Jesus your whole life, or whatever else it is. I think God was really gracious with me and not letting me get too near, even study. Like there was a point where I was thinking about doing Bible college in my earlier 20s, and it was really good that I didn't, because I think in that case it would have trivialized the whole thing for me because my heart wasn't there. But if God has been able, in my case, I think, and even in Jacob's case in the Bible, and in the case of the prodigal son, and in every other person he's ever redeemed, been able to take their mistakes and their mess and use that for the glory of his kingdom, we can't really write ourselves off. And so, yeah, I mean, for somebody who might be in that boat, the question I think you got to ask is, am I the thing that's in the way? Yeah. People need to know that they have a Savior who loves them. And wouldn't it be wonderful if our insecurities weren't the thing that got in the way of us going into ministry, so that more people, not just because we're telling them, but because we're encouraging others as well and teaching and raising them up to do it. Wouldn't it be great if more people heard the gospel because we were able to be honest with ourselves about who we are and let God really show us that he's forgiven us. Yeah.
So good. So good. Would you mind finish by praying for those listening just for wherever they're at, that God would really encourage them.